Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. I welcome you all on behalf of Nyaya Forum. Nyaya Forum for Courtroom Lawyering is a Nalsar-based student initiative to learn and initiate discussions about courts and lawyering. Till now, we have hosted multiple speakers in our webinar series on practical skills of litigation. Today, we are hosting Mr. Pramod Kumar Dubey. He will speak on the topic, how to approach a sexual harassment case, law, procedures, and ethics. Mr. Dubey studied law at Campus Law Center, New Delhi, and started practicing in the year 1995. During his 25 years at the bar, Mr. Dubey has appeared in matters across various courts in India. Some of the notable cases he has been a part of are the Tehelka Commission case, the CWG scam, coal scam, Tarun Tejpal, Kargil coffin case, Bhushan Steel case, to name a few. Being an expert in criminal law, the prosecution has also sought his counsel. He had undertaken various cases from the side of the prosecution, such as Arushi Talwar murder case and Gopal Kanda murder case. He even represents the Delhi police as a special prosecutor in various cases. I'm sure we learn a lot from his today's lecture. He'll be taking a short Q&A session at the end, so you can all send your questions through the Q&A option in the webinar. Without further ado, I would like to invite him to begin the lecture.
Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, the Nalsar and the team, for inviting me for this session. I'm very grateful, and I'm thankful to my colleagues, my office colleagues, my ex-colleagues. Today's topic of the discussion is the sexual harassment cases, how to approach the sexual harassment cases, procedure, ethics, etc., etc. At the outset, I would like to mention, in India, we have basically 5 laws broadly which deals with the sexual harassment cases. Number 1 is the Indian Penal Code. 2 is the Indecent Representation of the Women Act 1986. Sexual Harassment at the Workplace Prevention, Provision, Redressal Act 2013, IT Act and its rule and regulation, and the POSCO Act. So these are the basically 5 acts. In Indian Penal Code, prior to 2013, there was a very limited scope for the sexual harassment cases, like 354, that was the outrage modesty of a woman. And the second one was the 509, apart from 375, 376 IPC. So the 509 basically, if there was a sexual harassment, the only section was available in the Indian Penal Code was 509 IPC. Subsequently, with the changes, we already had the Indecent Representation of the People Act, to showing the pornography, so many things. But after important case of this country, that is the Bhauri Devi case. This is a very important case, and that is basically the turning point of the sexual harassment cases in India. It happened somewhere in 1992. Ms. Bhauri Devi was the social worker of the government department, and she made a protest for the child marriage of 1-year-old girl. Subsequently, in return to her protest, she was subjected to the gang rape. Her husband was also beaten, manhandled by the affluent people of the village. Ultimately, they got acquittal, and the acquittal was very surprising by the trial court. The trial court came with the finding that, seeing the status of the people, it is not possible they will commit such an offense. The matter went to the High Court. Again, the shocking. But the Bhauri Devi gave a new dimension for the sexual harassment cases in India. And pursuant thereto, Vishakha, an NGO, filed a writ petition under Article 32 before Honorable Supreme Court of India, entitled as the Vishakha versus State of Rajasthan, and Union of India was the party. And the bench headed by Justice G.S. Burma, who was also after Nirbhaya case, he was also heading the team, the commission constituting Mr. J.S. Burma, Justice Leela Seth, and Mr. Gopal Subramaniam. So Vishakha case is very important, and certain guidelines, as many as 13 guidelines were laid down in Vishakha case, and it was known as the Vishakha guidelines. So as per the Honorable Supreme Court, the mandate was given to all the offices, immaterial, whether it is the government offices, private concern, NGO, hospital, nurses, educational institution, they have to follow the Vishakha guidelines. And the Vishakha guidelines was in force since 1997. So it continued till 2013. In 2012, the bill for the sexual harassment of the Women Act was passed from both the House, Parliament, as well as Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha. Ultimately, it got assent of the President in 2013 and came into the force. So this act came, sexual harassment cases against women. The three things is very important in this act: provision, prevention, and redressal. This act is basically divided into 8 chapters containing 30 sections. And almost they consider the guidelines laid down, the judgment laid down by the Supreme Court. Though India was the signatory of the UN General Assembly since 1979, but there was no law on this point. And the main crux of sexual harassment cases against the Women Act was to protect the dignity of a woman at the workplace. As Justice Chandrachud has recently, in February, that is on 25th February 2020, in the case of Punjab and Sindh Bank versus Durgesh Kumar, it has been held that the sexual harassment at the workplace is an affront to the fundamental right of the woman to equality under Article 14 and 15, and her right to live with dignity under Article 21 of the Constitution of India, as well as her right to practice as a profession, trade. So basically, sexual harassment cases, this violates Article 14, right to equality and equal protection of the law, Article 15, Article 19(1)(g), and Article 21. Article 21, right to live with dignity and the personal liberty. So this judgment of Justice Chandrachud has recognized the violation of the right of the female are the fundamental rights. In his judgment, I have just mentioned Durgesh Kumar versus Punjab and Sindh Bank versus Durgesh Kumar. In sexual harassment cases, there is a very correlation with the sexual harassment and the sexual assault. These both are the interlinked. The sexual harassment cases, there are so many guidelines, there are so many procedures, and there is a radical change after the Vishakha. After Vishakha, there is a provision, there is a definition of the workplace. Workplace, it is widely defined, and in one judgment of Supreme Court, Delhi High Court, I am so sorry, that is Saurabh Kumar Malik versus Controller Auditor General of India. The Delhi High Court has given the wider definition of the workplace. In that judgment, the High Court has said, if your colleague, the employee, is sitting outside the workplace, suppose he's working on internet, on the electronic media, and he's abusing his right, violating the right of the female, that place would also come under the workplace. So you cannot confine workplace only to the office and the 4 and the boundary of institution. It is a very wider scope, and it go beyond all this scope, all these ranges. So workplace has already been defined. I don't need to mention the provisions, which provision the workplace is defined, but it is already defined. The aggrieved person is already defined in the act, and also the sexual harassment is again defined by the Honorable High Court of Delhi in Dr. Punita Sodhi versus Union of India, where it has been held that the sexual harassment is subjective experience. So this is the law on this aspect. There is a subjective experience of the person. So sexual harassment, if you are going to sexual harassment at the workplaces, there are provisions like you have to make the complaint to the internal ICC, Internal Complaint Committee, which is mandatory for every institution. So there must be the constitution of the ICC or local committee, that is at the district level. So first is the ICC. ICC, the constitution of the ICC, there would be a female employee, that is the senior most female employee of the institution, and not less than 2 persons who have the social background or the legal knowledge, and they work for the cause of the women. The third is 1 person must be from the NGO. So this is the constitution of the ICC. You file the complaint. The time limit for the filing the complaint is 90 days from the last date of the incident. There also the procedure how you file the complaint. The complaint, there must be the time, the description of the person, date, and the concise explanation of the facts. You don't mention the wrong facts. The facts would be given to the ICC. The ICC would interview. ICC had the power to grant the interim relief. Interim relief means they can send the employee for 3-month leave. Either the agreed person or the employee, they can transfer the employee, they can conduct the proceeding. They have the power to record the evidence, but they cannot go stricto sensu with the Indian Evidence Act. There would be application of the rule of evidence, not the Evidence Act. So they would interview the agreed person, the victim, the respondent. They have the power to record the statement of the person. Then they will prepare the report and they will file the report. If in the report they find prima facie commission of the offense, they can recommend the finding to the police for registration of the FIR under 509. The same is with the local committee, where the chairman would be the deputy magistrate and the chairman would be the female, then NGO, the ex officio, the social welfare officer would be the ex officio. So these are the constitution of the ICC and NCC. So you have to do all the things, but one thing is very important. It is the burden duty of the every employer to sensitize of their employee. They should circulate the information to all the employee that there is no scope to sexually harass your colleague, your female colleague, because the sexual harassment is not only the physically. There are so many ways to commit the sexual harassment, like physical contact and advances, a demand or request for the sexual favors, making sexually colored remarks, showing the pornographic picture. There are so many things. These all are prohibited because this would directly affect the aggrieved person. Because the moment you engage in such activities, the agreed person would suffer so many things. There would be the mental trauma, they can go under trauma, they can go under depression, they can commit the suicide. There are so many things. So one must be sensible while working at the workplace to the female colleague. They must respect, they must give the right to equality as guaranteed under Article 14 of the Constitution of India. Every female of this country has the right to dignity as Article 21, right to livelihood, the trade and profession like a male, so there won't be any discrimination. They have the equal right under Article 19(1)(g) and Article 15 of the Constitution of India. So these are basically the Constitution, the procedure for the sexual harassment at the workplace. Three things is very important, as I have mentioned. You have to prove it, you have to prevent, you have the redressal. Redressal means when the ICC, the complaint will be given to the ICC, their first attempt would be the conciliation between the parties. But the conciliation should not be made in terms, monetary terms. But in my personal view, I don't find this act, the Sexual Harassment at the Work Women Act, is a very aggressive act. Rather, I would say it's a toothless legislation, because the way the offense is being committed and the provision which has been prescribed, the women are certainly not going to get the justice which was required. I have experienced, one lady contacted me and she was suffering from the sexual harassment at the behest of her senior colleague. She made the complaint, senior colleague got transferred, but ultimately she suffered a lot. They did not believe her version, and rather the colleague of his senior officer, who became the immediate superior officer of the victim, started torturing her, making the remarks. The senior officer was a female, though she was the female, but she degraded her. Her ACR was affected and she came under a lot of depression. So you cannot say the Sexual Harassment Against the Women Act is a perfect law which has every redressal. No, I don't think. It is my personal view. I don't think they have sufficient redressal in the act itself. Now, if you come, the much has been changed after Nirbhaya Act. There is a lot of amendment in the Indian Penal Code, Information Technology Act, Indian Evidence Act. And Indian Evidence Act, there is one very important section they have amended. There is 114A, section 114A of the Indian Evidence Act. 114A, Indian Evidence Act, shift the burden of the accused person to prove that the female had not consented for the sexual relation. So 114A is very important section which has been incorporated under the Indian Evidence Act. The second aspect is very important because in earlier time, the test in the sexual offenses was there must be the penetration, there must be the rupture of the hymen. But interestingly, there was one case, it's a very important case, a reportable case, that is the state of UP versus Dr. Naval Kishore Dubey. This case pertaining to 1994 Supreme Court, and Justice A.S. Anand was the Judge Supreme Court. In that matter, there was no penetration at all. There was no rupture of hymen. The doctor came with the defense. Yes, as per the allegation of the victim, the sexual act was regular act, but the hymen is still intact. The court examined the medical expert, and the medical expert opined that it is not necessary the penetration would be that depth to rupture the hymen. So the Supreme Court passed the order. The penetration is not required for the commission of the offense under 376 IPC. Mere touching is sufficient. And that happened after Nirbhaya. We have one case that is pertaining to year 1994, the very famous case, K.C. Jaku. He was the employee in the Ministry of Home Affairs. Her wife filed a case abusing his own minor child with his office colleague. The name of the case is Sudesh Jaku versus K.C. Jaku. The matter was argued before Honorable High Court against the order on charge, and the lady, the wife, was represented by late Mr. Arun Jaitley, and Mr. Jaitley argued the proposition which was ultimately enacted after Nirbhaya. The same argument was advanced before Justice Jaspal Singh. He did not accept the argument of Mr. Jaitley because the law at that time was very conservative. The only charge under section 354 made out, but the argument of Mr. Jaitley was taken after the Nirbhaya in amendment of 2013. So after Nirbhaya, much has been changed, like section 53A, section 154. 154 mandates that if the information for the commission of the offense under section 354 or 377 is given, that must be recorded by a female police officer. And as per the Lalita Kumari judgment of Supreme Court, these are the offenses, cognizable offense. There must be registration of the FIR. Now the second section is 166A. 166A says if there is information for commission of the offense under section 354, 376, and the police has failed to register, there is a provision for the punishment under section 166A of the Indian Penal Code. The next section is 357. The 357 is the treatment of the victims. It mandates the moment there is information for the commission of the offense, it is the mandate on the part of the police to immediately give the first aid and the treatment to the victim. And if treatment is not given, again there is a punishment under section 166B IPC. There is one very important provision, that is 164A CRPC, especially section 5A of 164A CRPC, which mandates how the statement of the victim of section 354A, 354B, C, D, 376 would be recorded. The second thing, without any delay, the victim must be subjected for the medical examination. And the medical examination, you have to take the sample for the DNA proliferation. So it is very important that the moment you get the information, you have to take the victim for the medical examination, and the medical examination, you have to take the sample, the doctor has to take the sample, doctor has to give the detail of the incident, the name of the person, the name of the victim, time, what is the nature of the injury, the time of the injury, what was seized from the victim, whether the semen was taken or not, vaginal swab was taken or not for the DNA proliferation, everything has to be mentioned. It is mandated as in section 165A of Indian Penal Code. Now section 3A also says the examination of the accused person. So if you are examining the accused take take the sample from where the DNA proliferation can be generated and it can be matched. So the section 53A and 164A both give the scientific way of the investigation. One more important thing is that is amendment in section 173 CRPC. They have amended 173 CRPC. 173 CRPC is meant for the filing the charge sheet. So the 173 1A was incorporated by way of the amendment section in 2013, and it says that the investigation pertaining to the sexual harassment cases must be conducted within 2 months from the date of the information, the date of the initiation of the investigation. So the basically motive behind all these things for the speedy trial, speedy disposal of the case, so that the victim will not suffer the trauma for a very long time, indefinite time. So you have to conduct the investigation within 2 months from the date of the information. You file the charge sheet, give the details, and along with the charge sheet, you must file the DNA test report. Because the moment there is a DNA test, it will be very difficult for the accused to defend his case. Next provision, that is the 327, because 327 gives the right for the open court proceeding, but 327 says in the offense related to the sexual offenses, the proceeding must be conducted in camera. Only designated lawyer and the victim or the accused person would be there. Even the accused would be kept outside the reach of the victim, so that the accused cannot influence the victim. Third thing is you have to maintain the identity of the victim. You cannot publish, and there is also restriction of the publication of the court proceeding under section 327. So the court has given the guidelines, and the court is very sensitive while giving all these things, and the act is there. The 327 is very important section. Now, I would like to mention one thing, that is judgment is Lillu alias Rajesh versus State of Haryana, that is 2013 judgment of the Supreme Court. What was happening in the rape cases, the doctor used to put the 2 finger, and the test was being called the 2-finger test if the victim is the rape victim. So Lulu says, no, this is not required. The victim should not again go through the same mental trauma. And Lulu give the direction, no, you cannot do all these things because this is against the humanities. So 2-finger theory also goes by the judgment of the Honorable Supreme Court in 2013 in Lulu. One thing is very important and it must be kept in mind, that is doctrine of hearsay, especially section 6 of the Indian Evidence Act. We are coming across every time that either victim has directly informed the police for the commission of the offense, or the victim has disclosed the factum of the commission of the offense to either to her relative, her friends, or the parents. So section 6 comes into the play, and it is very important because it can change the entire case of the prosecution, and even it can give the benefit to the accused persons. So section 6 must be dealt with in a very intensive manner. What I am trying to suggest, that there you must, the victim of the sexual harassment or the sexual assault must avoid to delay in informing to the relatives, friends, or the parents. The disclosure for the commission of the offense must be contemporaneous period. The moment there is a delay, then the onus lie upon the victim and the prosecution side to explain the delay, the cause of the delay. Though the Supreme Court in Gurmeet Singh has given the finding on the delay in the FIR, but that case was altogether different. I'll deal with the judgment of Gurmeet Singh versus State of Punjab in a short while. So section 6 is very important. My advice would be immediately after the commission of the offense, you immediately inform to the person who is having authority to take the action. You make the complaint either to your relative, to your friends, to your parents, whosoever, or your employer, or the person who is having the authority to take any action. Because there is one provision in Evidence Act, that is the exception of the hearsay, section 8 illustration J. This is very important section, and that section also always gives benefit to the accused persons. It says if a victim has been ravished, she should immediately, subsequently thereafter, inform for the commission of the offense. If she failed to do so, then the conduct of the victim would be seen. This is the only provision in the Indian Evidence Act where the conduct of the victim, the prosecutrix, would be seen. Otherwise, there is no provision to see the conduct of the victim. Even the victim is of the easy virtue, the Supreme Court said, immaterial, what is her conduct, what is her character. You cannot take the benefit of her character, because even the person is of the easy virtue, she has the right to live with the dignity as guaranteed under Article 21 of the Constitution of India. In Gurmeet Singh versus State of Punjab, there was a delay. The defense was taken, there was a delay in the FIR. The Supreme Court says no, because seeing the background of the prosecutrix, they were the different background. They were very hesitant in making the complaint to the police because they have the apprehension of their respect in the society. This is the reason there was a delay in the lodging of the FIR. And the Supreme Court in Gurmeet Singh versus State of Punjab says, if the witness is of a sterling quality, her testimony is impeccable, this is sufficient for the conviction of the accused. So what is required? If you are the rape victim, there must be consistency in your statement. You should be consistent with your case, your facts, everything. So these are basically the provisions. There are so many judgments, and I have mentioned 8J. We as a defense counsel always take the benefit of 8J. So the whosoever is there to represent the victim, they must keep in mind the accused will take the benefit of section 8J. The second thing is the bail. Recently, Delhi High Court Justice Pratibha Singh has passed the order on the 5th June in minor G versus Government of NCT of Delhi, where the mandate has been given, direction has been given that at the time of the hearing of the bail application under POSCO or under 376, the notice to the bail application must be given to the police. The police must inform the victim that there is a bail application is listed and the hearing would be such and such that, and this is the copy of the bail petition of the accused, and the victim must represented. Victim must be given the right to oppose the bail. This is very landmark judgment of Delhi High Court which has recently been passed. So the Delhi High Court is in the sexual harassment cases is a very proactive court. They are passing the order. They are ensuring the right which has been granted to the victim under Article 14, 15, 19, 1G and 21. Because earlier what was the practice? If the accused has filed the bail application, the victim would not be knowing and she would not get the opportunity to put her version to oppose the bail. Now Justice Pratibha Singh judgment and the direction has been given for the circulation of the judgment to all the district judges and all the police station. So now as on date, the judgment passed by Justice Pratibha Singh is the law of the land on the bail jurisprudence for the commission of the offense. The next is 309 CRPC, that is the early disposal of the case. What the Supreme Court says? The Supreme Court says in the rape cases, the moment the charge sheet is filed and the charge is framed, the court must prepare the calendar, how the court will proceed further. There must be the calendar for the recording of the evidence, the examination in chief, cross-examination, which witness is coming when, how is going to be conducted. So the victim would be get the speedy result and there would be the speedy trial. So the victim would not suffer for a infinitive time. So there must be the calendar. The calendar must be put to the accused. The prosecuting agency must produce the witness, because when the calendar would be there and as per the calendar, the prosecuting agency would be knowing that which witness is coming for the depose. It is the duty of the prosecuting agency to ensure the presence of the witness so that there won't be any delay. So the court has passed the order in consonance of section 309 of the CRPC for the speedy trial. One more section is there, that is 228A, which I have already mentioned. The identity of the accused should not be disclosed at all. If the name of the accused is there, you have to put the white fluid on the name. You don't disclose the name in the public at large. Identity of the victim must be concealed. Even there is a media report, the identity of the victim should not be disclosed. And lawyer who is conducting the trial of the rape victim should restrain himself from disclosing the court proceeding in the media and the public at large. There are so many ethics. First ethics for the sexual harassment cases is to maintain the dignity of the victim. This is the paramount consideration for the prosecuting agency as well as for the defense. The second thing is you must be sensitive toward the rape victim. You always avoid to sensitize the case. You don't ask the question which can directly affect the reputation and the character of the victim. You don't ask unnecessary question so that the victim should go the unnecessary rigors of the lengthy cross-examination. The judge should also be sensitive. So there are so many ethics, because the victim, as per the case of the prosecution, there is of course, there is a presumption of the innocence till proved guilty. But as per the case, the victim has made the allegations, she has already gone through the trauma by way of the assault made by the accused. She should not again assaulted while going through the rigors of the evidence and standing in the witness box. Whenever the victim is feeling uncomfortable with the questions of the defense, it is the paramount duty of the defense counsel to restructure the question and put the question where the victim is comfortable. If she is not comfortable, always avoid to ask uncomfortable questions. You should not go in the nitty-gritty, how it happened, when it happened, what. You don't ask this kind of the question. The moment you will ask this kind of question, meaning thereby you are not sensitive towards the rape victim. So you have to avoid all the things. And you have to maintain the professional ethics while conducting the trial. The law also prescribes, if the trial is being conducted, preferably the trial must be conducted by the female presiding officer. The session judge, additional session judge must be female if available, or if the magistrate trial must be female, to maintain the dignity, so that the prosecutrix would be very comfortable in making the deposition. Even as per the law, whenever there is a information for commission of the sexual harassment given to the police officer, it is the duty of the police officer and to provide a counselor, the person from the NGO, for the consideration of to console rehabilitate the victim, so that the victim will be able to go further with the recourses. You must generate the confidence in the victim. You have to balance the right of the victim and the right of the accused. Being the defense counsel, you cannot think over only about the accused. You have to you are not only the defense counsel, you are the officer of the court. So you have to maintain the dignity of the victim. You have to be sensitive if you are conducting the trial related to the sexual offenses. In the POSCO, there are so many things. I believe the POSCO and the latest amendment in the POSCO, which prescribes the death, that is a very wise step of the legislature. Because the POSCO, there is a lot of abuse of the minor children, the minors, which cannot explain all the things. So the POSCO is, if I have to compare with the Sexual Harassment of the Women at the Workplaces Act and the POSCO, I would say the POSCO is far better and beneficial law compared to the earlier one. And there are so many provisions in the POSCO. POSCO is also the reverse burden. The reverse burden is put to the accused to prove that yes, he is innocent, he has not committed the offense. There is a bar on the bail. So many things in the POSCO. But in the POSCO cases, what we are coming across, there is some problem regarding the age of the victim. There are so many contradictions coming. Sometimes there is a contradiction in the school certificates. There are the contradiction in the school certificate and the certificate issued by the municipal corporation or the panchayat. Then there is a dispute regarding the X-ray plate, so many things. So the officer who are conducting the investigation in respect of the POSCO must be given the proper training to conduct the investigation so that it will ensure the maximum number of the punishment and the prove the case of the prosecution. So these are my view on the sexual harassment cases. I believe, Bhasya, this is now you have the time for the question answer session.
Hello, sir. Thank you so much for this lecture. There are a few questions that we have, so I'll just start with asking one. First is, can you please throw some light on POSH obligations vis-a-vis co-working spaces?
Pardon, you are not audible, please come again.
Yes, sir. So the first question that we have is, can you please throw some light on POSH obligations vis-a-vis co-working spaces?
There is so many obligations. You have to maintain the work atmosphere there. You have to give the respect to all your employees. All employees must be knowing what is that respective duty towards their colleague, how they will proceed further, how they will maintain the dignity, because this would also ultimately affect the work also. So these are the requirements which can be maintained.
Okay, sir, thank you. The second question that we have is, where does the appeal from the decision of an ICC lies?
This is already given in the Act. If you see the Act, there is a provision for the appeal.
Yes, sir.
So you can go as per the provision for the appeal for the superior officer.
Okay, sir. Sir, in the next question is, where the victim is 16 years and accused is of between 16 to 18 years and a rape has occurred, which court has jurisdiction?
There is a judgment, latest judgment of the Supreme Court on the JJ Act. Now they have basically reduced the age from 18 to 16. So you see the judgment is very much clear. You cannot take the benefit of your being juvenile.
Okay, sir. So the next question that we have is that an attendee is asking that, in your opinion, how could the law be made more stringent in spite of there being so many laws, as the accused is still not deterred? So how can the law be made more stringent?
You have already made the stringent law, because in POSCO, there is already the amendment, there is a death sentence. In the IPC Act, there is a life imprisonment under 376. So I have already stated that this sexual harassment of women at the workplace is not the stringent law. There is no stringent provision for the deterrence. So in other act, there's IPC Act and the POSCO, they have already enacted the stringent provision which would be the deterrence to the public at large.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So another question that we have is that in bail matters, when notice is issued to the victim for giving her view, can a private counsel appear, or does it have to be a public prosecutor who will represent the victim?
See, there is a provision, if you see the provision 8 of section 24, if you are the aggrieved person, you have the right of the prosecution. But as per the latest judgment of the High Court, which I have recently mentioned, Justice Pratibha Singh judgment in Minor G versus Government NCT of Delhi, dated 5th June 2020, notice has been given, meaning thereby you've been given the opportunity to be represented by the counsel. So you have the right to represent through your counsel at the time of the bail.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So another question that we have is, in what circumstances could the POSH Act apply in cases where the act of sexual harassment occurs in a work from home scenario?
I think I have already mentioned work. I have already given the definition. There is a judgment of Mr. Saurabh Kumar Malik versus Government of Union of India, where they have defined explain the definition of the workplace. If you are other places and if you are committing this offense, that would also come under the purview of the workplace, and you would be prosecuted for that. The inquiry should be started, and the ICC committee or LC committee will take action against you.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So the last question that we have is that in the POSH Act, the victim can only be a female. So in your opinion, should the act's ambit be increased to include acts which have occurred against males as well?
See, there was a recommendation in the Justice J.S. Verma and Leela Commission and Mr. Gopal Subramaniam recommendation for the gender neutral. They have made the recommendation, but the Parliament did not pass the order. They have justified that if you see the recommendation of this committee, they have justified for the gender neutral. And after this boys locker room case, in my view, there must be the gender neutral. It should not confine only to the one gender. But it is up to the legislature, the parliamentarian, to enact the law.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for answering all the questions and for a very informative lecture. We are very grateful to you and your colleagues for accepting our request for this webinar series. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, sir.